Good evening and welcome to In My Humble Opinion. I'm your host, Niceguy. I'm joined tonight by Jessica Udischas, creator of Manic Pixie Nightmare Girls. Jessica, welcome to the program.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So I want to talk about the comic, but first tell me a bit about yourself.
Geez, myself. I am Chicago-born, transplant to Seattle, and I'm a transgender woman, and I make a webcomic called Manic Pixie Nightmare Girls.
So tell us a bit about that.
It's the adventures of Jessica Nightmare and her dealings with trans misogyny and cis sexism in the world.
So what are some of your influences? What inspires you for this work?
What inspired me to actually start making a webcomic, like every week, was basically my frustration with living as a transgender woman in the world. I couldn't keep down a job, basically, because I'm an out transgender woman. And, after losing another job, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I just started drawing these comics.
So I take it that quite a bit of this then is drawn from your own experience directly then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Problems in the workplace, problems with family, just in society in general.
Right. And I remember reading about one in particular, because I want to ask you about a couple of comics in particular, but one that really you were actually accused of exaggerating the event, and this was one where I think it was either your friend or partner, and you were shoved by one of the guys as you were walking on the street. You were accused of exaggerating this, and if I understood it correctly, when it happened in real life, you're actually hit with a bottle. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make a comment about how we routinely face violence,
right,
and we're discriminated against, and then when we name the people who did it, which is cisgender people, folks who are not transgender, are the people who are giving us a hard time.
Right.
People tend to be very upset. But so
that's your version of all, when somebody spray paints "All Lives Matter" over "Black Lives Matter" or whatever.
Yeah,
come on, like guys, Jesus.
But yeah, the incident was actually completely different. I wasn't with a friend; I was by myself. I just wanted to add, a character inside the comic that was my friend.
Right.
And it was and someone threw a glass bottle at my head, and it hit my head as I, was trying to get onto the bus. So.
Oh my God.
But the reason why I did the shove in the comic book was kind of it's like metaphorically trans women are pushed around in society.
Sure,
so that's kind of what I was going for with that.
And yet, as I understood from reading it, people actually accuse you of exaggerating it.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I've noticed ever since transitioning. It's like people will think that, just not take what I'm saying as seriously, or, believe me, or just think I'm malicious or lying.
Well, and it's there's layers of discrimination in that, because of course there's transphobia, but there's basically misogyny in that as well. I mean, it's the same. Even cis women will, reporting about abusers, and they're not believed, or they're victim blamed, and then on top of that you have the homophobia, the transphobia, etc. As it's just piled on. That is crazy. A couple of the other ones, and I guess a little bit lighter fare than that, because you don't shy away from any of it. I mean, that's one of the things. Almost every strip, it's very direct. It really addresses everything heads on. It's certainly not one of the strips. Oftentimes the fictional stories will put the transness of the character sort of in the background. This is all, we're dealing with this. We're talking about this. It's right out there.
Yeah, well, like I said, the comic was, bore out of frustration with, the cis world and the way that we're treated. But yeah, the direct in-your-face nature of a lot of the strips is, I think, directly a reflection of my personality. A lot of the times I don't hold back about what I think, or telling people about, the reality of our existence, and just, the blunt and subtle ways in which people treat us.
Sure.
Which is, funny, because, I would, talk about this stuff a lot. Mm-hmm. And it just, until I started drawing the comic, not many people took me seriously.
And yet, when you present it in a cartoon fashion, suddenly people are listening.
Yes,
there's something weird to be said about our society that would be the case, but I'm not sure what it is. And there's some of these are on a bit of a lighter note. I particularly, and I don't know if this was based on a real conversation, but you were talking to your mom about, I believe it was Christmas. I'm sorry, I keep saying you. And I guess first I need to ask, I mean, how the character is meant to be an author avatar, no?
Well, yeah, she is me to an extent, like, especially at first, when I first started doing the comics, definitely she was like 100% me. But as I kept going, I kind of felt weird about like having a comic.
Right. Okay.
With the main character was like basically myself. So like, I changed her name from Jessica to just Jessica with a K, and then because a lot of the times people would think that these comics are like 100% exactly what happened to me in real life.
Sure. Yeah.
When like sometimes I leave stuff out
or
like it'll be, like the one that you're talking about where I'm talking to my mom, it's like bits and pieces of different conversations.
Well, it was her reaction to you saying you want to be treated like all the other women in the family, and she answers by saying, so you want to do all the cooking and wash all the dishes while the boys sit on the couch, get drunk, and watch dumb action movies. Was that actually an answer that you got at some point?
Well, no, actually, that was just like me adding in there how, because my mom is by no means a feminist. So like that was just me adding my commentary about how oftentimes at, holiday family functions, even the most progressive family will like all of a sudden like revert back to archaic gender roles. And, the women will be stuck doing all the dishes and the guys are just getting drunk and watching sports or action movies or something. That was just, like my little thought that I wanted to add in on it.
Right. Okay. And some of the other things I want to ask you about. So there's a reoccurring character of a well-meaning but perhaps not particularly good ally.
Katie.
Katie.
I forgot my own character's name.
Well, the blonde. Yeah. I mean, she's normally referred to as the ally, and
the overcompensating trans ally.
Right. Well, and I also say, like, have you actually heard A is for ally from the LGBTQIA? A for ally?
There has been times where, like I'll be like scrolling the internet and I see, someone talking about how the A is for ally.
Wow.
When it's, I know, right?
Well, I mean, because I know there's no question that I've been there. There's no, in fact, the one where I think it ends with the line of, you're being a slightly marginal, decent human being. Here's your cookie. And I mean, there's no question. I think everyone's from my perspective's point of view has probably wanted a cookie at one point for basically just being a decent human being and treating somebody with the basic amount of respect they're entitled to. But with the way that she was going about it, it's just it's hilarious because it's over the top and it's dead on point so often as well. And I know we've all been there too.
Yeah, the overcompensating trans ally, is based off of like a bunch of different interactions I've had. Like I had a roommate who would refer to the other women we lived with as guys. Hey guys, and then when it came to me, he would be like, "Hey girl," just like all of a sudden exaggerated. Like, and I've gotten a hard time for that comic too, because like the tagline underneath it says, "Oh, it's a different kind of sexism."
Right.
And people are like, "What? People trying too hard to be nice is sexist now?" Like all that. They're overcompensating for a reason, and the reason is that they don't, truly see you as a woman. So that's why they're overcompensating in the first place.
Yeah,
so I mean, it's a sexism.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it were, four guys and a girl, you would just say, "Hey guys," for whatever. It wouldn't.
Which is funny. I actually have a comic coming out. It's my next one or the one after, talking about how the word "guys" is seen as gender neutral, while if you call a group of mixed gender folks ladies,
it's insulting.
Some of the guys might be insulted.
Right. Very sexist language in that regard. Yeah, that's true. And one of the other things I got to ask you about too, because it's the joke comes up a couple of times, the kitty cocktails.
Oh yeah. I mean, I just like it's I put that like inside the I was trying to do like, like a story that lasted more than one comic. Right. And, I just like wanted to connect them all together somehow. And so I'm not a big drinker. Like I
got that impression.
Yeah. I might have a glass of wine with dinner here and there. But, when I go to parties and stuff like that, I kind of feel like on the outside because people are all getting buzzed on alcohol and I'm like sipping on a kitty cocktail, all nervous. Because, that just adds to my anxiety, how everyone else is drinking and I'm not. And so, like, I get all tense just sipping on my kitty cocktail.
And I have to vouch with the other. I don't remember if it was a recurring character now, but whoever was. I love here, sit next to me on the couch for the rest of the party, and then the whole liquid courage statement. Because it's so true. It's sad, but it's so true.
Yes, especially I noticed at queer parties. I'm super intimidated at queer parties because of I've been to a party once where like the host literally looked me up and down and then rolled her eyes because I wasn't dressed queer enough, or I don't know what it was. So it was very intimidating, and I felt self-conscious for the rest of the night.
Oh, yeah. How to make somebody feel unwelcome? Jeez. Oh my God. Well, and one of the character will manage to sort of pull off being both socially awkward and hilariously sarcastic. So I'm kind of wondering, in with you personally, and how much of yourself is in that character. What's the balance for you then between being nervous and having that, like you say, speak your mind and biting wit that the character sometimes comes out with in the strip?
Yeah, a lot of times I can be nervous out in public, but I'm not like a complete introvert. Like depending on the mood, like I could be the life of the party. But yeah, even in awkward situations, if it's a social situation where people start being trans misogynistic or cis-sexist, I'll start speaking because my frustration with that will overcome any social awkwardness I have.
Right. Now, one thing...
Yeah, she's a lot of me, like, honest. And part of the reason why I, changed her to maybe not represent 100% me was mostly because, I kept getting letters with, people wondering if, every comic was, a direct experience.
Right.
And, it's about, sometimes it's based on 100% direct experience. Sometimes I, change it around just so a joke will fit.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Well, and it really is. It's an amazing and adorable caricature. And I wonder, too, because you have your pictures on the Facebook page and whatnot. Is that, when you see that character, is there something, do you see yourself in that character then? Or, I guess I look at her and I see very enthusiastic, very excited, very nervous, and just all because of the way it's drawn, all because of what you've put into the style of the character.
At first I did very much see her as me. But as time's going on, I'm just drawing it, and it's just drawing the character. I feel separate from her, even though because when it comes down to the whole comic is me, because I'm writing it and drawing it and stuff like that.
But she's kind of taken a life of her own then.
Yes, I hope so at least.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned a couple times, and I guess, and it's kind of funny that I've been doing this, and I haven't been doing this that long, but I've been doing this as long as I had, and it's not really come up in any clear way, but you've mentioned a couple times, so I'm going to ask you, if you could clarify for me, and for anyone who might be confused about this, the difference between strictly transphobia versus transmisogyny and or cis-sexism.
Oh, well, to know cis-sexism, first you need to know what cis is. And, cis means on the same side of,
right.
And so a cis person is someone who is comfortable with the gender they were assigned at birth, basically.
In the simplest way, and perhaps oversimplified, but it means not trans.
Yes, exactly. And, cis-sexism is, kind of putting out there the belief that cisgenders are more legitimate than transgenders. That's what cis-sexism is. Anytime you, make a statement that enforces cisgender supremacy or, suggests that transgenders are inferior to cisgenders.
Right,
that's what cis-sexism is.
Okay.
And transmisogyny is cis-sexism that's against trans women. So, anytime a trans woman faces cis-sexism, it's going to be transmisogyny by default, because you can't separate the oppression that trans women face for being women, because it's always intertwined.
Right.
And it's pretty much obvious the way that, trans women in the media are dissected for the way they look and et cetera. All the same double standards that, all women face.
Right. You're either
let me get to the transphobia thing, because, lately I've decided that I don't want to use that word so much because,
okay,
which is fine. People can use that. I'm not the type of person that, is going to tell you what to say or not. But, because I have a real fear of heights. I get up high and I get dizzy and I feel real fear.
Right.
So I feel like transphobia and homophobia.
Yeah.
It doesn't describe what it is as well as cis-sexism, or instead of homophobia, I've been using heterosexism, because a lot of this, just just from pure like hate and
right. It's not a fear. You're just being an asshole.
Yeah, and then if there was a fear, I feel like the fear comes from, inside themselves, because so much, violence that we face, stems like oftentimes from like a man who is attracted to a trans woman,
right,
and then figures out that she's trans, and then gets all insecure with himself, and then like takes out that insecurity on her.
Right. And I mean, the despicable part about that is that that's a legal defense in 49 and 50 states, and yet people are going to deny that this is an issue. The fuck? That is messed up.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the same double standards, because you have, whether it's the woman who's being too uptight or too girly, too slutty, too prudish, and then put on top of that, are you trying too hard? Are you not feminine enough? Are you mind your own business, people? It's just clothes. Fuck.
Yeah, no, exactly. We're policed even more harshly than cis women when it comes to that kind of stuff, because there's this like resentment towards trans women, because they don't, people don't really see us as women. At best, they see us as men who turned into women, rather than women who've been mistaken for men and boys their whole lives. Right.
I mean, one of the things, because early on, and I can go back a few years, where I had written a piece on my blog that if I were to read it out of context, it would come off as extremely, what's the word I should be using here? Cis sexist, I suppose. I would say transphobic, very not very enlightened. And the only redeeming part of it is essentially written from the point of view of, I know this is wrong, but I don't know why, so fill me in. And part of my issue was that I had no way of grasping the idea of gender identity, largely because if you can go your entire life without ever having, taking it for granted, essentially, there's no basis upon which to think, okay, so why would I want to be something else? And it was turned around for me recently, and I'm curious to get your take on this, is they said, okay, don't think of it as you want to be something else. Just imagine you are who you are, meaning in my case that I'm a man, but I look so much like a woman that everyone treats me like that and expects me to act that way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how I like to view it myself. And then like on top of that, like you're not allowed to be yourself too, just to like, besides like being treated, because honestly, like being treated as a woman in this society sometimes isn't the best.
And that's just it, is people talk about something being a choice, and it's like, well, my God, why would anybody choose to give up privilege to have all these double standards placed on them to be discriminated? It's like, that makes no sense, guys. Come on, this isn't just a flip choice that somebody decides to do one day. I mean, come on. It makes no sense at all.
Well, yeah, a lot of times our backs are to the wall. I struggle personally with depression and suicide. And, this is something that, not all trans people have this, but, for me, it was since a young age, like my whole life, deeply confusing and painful. And God knows what would have happened if I've never, actually decided to transition. I could be, dead right now.
Right. And that's something I do want to get your, I would say push back, but more just get your take on it. This was from the last comic that you did, which was about the whole Brave thing. And it's interesting as I read it, because I think I think I get it from one perspective, and maybe I do, maybe I don't. But like I kind of took it as that last panel when you're saying, it's how it's awkward to be called brave just for showing your face in public. And to say it that way, I was like, oh God, that's almost insulting in some ways. But at the same time, I guess I've got to at least stick up for the brave aspect of it one time. And that's when I think of everybody I know, and including myself, when I think of how many times we sell out ourselves in some small way, sell out our principles in some small way, like the story that you posted, where we might see something going on and not step in, or we might hear somebody say something and we don't speak up. And and what are we risking in doing that? We're risking what? An uncomfortable conversation? And I get this. I get the idea, as you said in that last comic, that you might have killed yourself otherwise. That was the way it was put out there. But when we think of what I think, well, when a cis person who maybe stops to think for a minute thinks about what the trans community faces in terms of discrimination and in terms of violence, and just, well, like the story you said, some guy hits you in the head with a bottle. I've never been hit in the head with a bottle. Holy crap. And to be able to face that, and yet to still function, to still move forward, because I think we're looking at it from the point of view of, as often as our principles crumble on a daily basis, I think we look at it as saying, God, how do you do that? How do you still move forward with your life? Because I think that it terrifies, the thought really terrifies us, I think, if we stop to think about it for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that's the thing. People mean well when they call us brave.
Right.
And
it's a different point of view.
Yeah, but like at the same time, like you said, it's on the edge of being condescending because we are just being ourselves.
Right.
But sometimes it does take courage to just go out there into the world.
Right.
Especially, like I was talking to a trans woman earlier today, and she's afraid to like really stem herself up and go out into the world because of fear of violence.
Yeah.
So I guess in some aspects, like, of course, we all have to be brave from time to time.
Right.
But like in the context in which the word brave is thrown at trans people, especially trans women, a lot of times it's like slight condescension that sometimes rubs us the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean,
and in fact, actually, as I was making this comic, I was taking a break and I was just scrolling through the internet and I saw this video of a trans woman saying, "This is my imitation of a cis woman ally." And then she just repeatedly said, "You are so brave. You are so brave," over and over again. And this is just our mundane, everyday life. Like, I'm not brave for going to the grocery store and getting groceries.
It's not. I mean, other people's. I mean, when I think of if I think of the last time that I failed to act or failed to do something that I felt would have been truer to myself, again, it was an irrational fear. I mean, there is legitimate violence out there. I mean, there's a legitimate risk. And yet, I mean, and again, people feel fear, sure. But I think of courage not as the absence of fear, but rather facing fear, rather moving forward in the face of that and, getting past that. And I get it. Yeah, you can't, it's more than that. It's not just, it's very simplistic.
But when I began transitioning, I had no idea what was ahead. I didn't even know much about the trans community, the violence that we faced, etc. So at the time, I was just doing my thing, because for me, it was like the moment I found out it was possible, I started doing it. I didn't even think about it. So for me, actually transitioning, it was no bravery involved. It was just like, oh, this is what I have to do. Kind of thing.
But then the first time that you were confronted with something like that, though, that had to take you back a bit.
Yeah, I remember the first time I experienced, misogyny. It was just a few weeks after I told my friends, hey, call me Jessica now. This is who I am.
Right.
We're all out for drinks, having a good time. And, I was walking up to the bar to get, another soda. And this man just grabbed me by the arm and yanked me and pulled me in close to him. And it was terrifying. This is the kind of stuff that, all women face.
Right. Creepers. Welcome to the sisterhood.
But and then the first time I experienced trans misogyny, I remember, I was walking down the street, and this is before I've started medically transitioning. And, this guy drives by and sticks his head out the window and it's like, "You're really a dude, aren't you?" and peels off. And this is out in public too. And I just my whole body felt like it was on fire. And I just started crying and I had to run home. It was awful.
Right.
And I've been lucky enough to not experience much stuff from strangers often. But there's been times I'm hanging out with friends and you can see people whispering and looking in our direction. Some people actually, in fact, the comic that we were talking about earlier where the one guy says, "I think these women are men."
Right.
That actually happened inside a pizzeria. That line was, I was with some friends and, one of my friends was ordering a pizza and the lady in front of her was all like, "I think that woman is a man," which, we laugh about now because... I mean, that's another thing, a lot of times I personally just laugh at the trans misogyny and sexism people have towards us, because if not, I would be depressed all the time if I'm not laughing at how ridiculous it is.
Right. Well, and there's no question that it's, it's one thing to be confused, but I just kind of wonder what kind of why is it so many people in our society just can't, their day is not complete unless they've been a douchebag to somebody at some point, Hey, there's somebody walking minding their own business. Let me ruin their day for the
No, they're not happy with themselves.
Oh, well, yeah, it's a very charitable and philosophical way to look at it, I suppose.
Well, I when I was younger and a teenager and not happy with who I was definitely not the nicest person in the world.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, and I guess from that point of view, I think we can all relate to that, I suppose. I mean, you're supposed to grow out of it at some point. Some people never do, I guess. That's
yeah. The internet is it's filled with man babies.
Yeah, it amazes me too, because I wonder, is who you really are, who you are, what you say when you hide behind a keyboard, but is that who you really are if you never actually have the guts to say that to somebody in real life?
And, sometimes when I'm at at a concert or something, I'll look at a crowd and just wonder what those kind of people would be on the internet. Because to your face, everyone's super nice to you.
Oh yeah, yeah. One of the other things going along the lines of the gender roles and the societal double standards, recent. I don't know if it was recent. I think it might have even been a New Year's resolution. As I was prepping for this, I was sort of reading through some of the recent Facebook posts, and you mentioned something about the difficulty of giving a firm no. And I noticed a lot of the comments to that were along the lines of, yeah, people know I kind of try to be diplomatic, I try to kind of be nice, and then they end up walking all over me. And I wonder if, as much as this is, I mean, obviously this is going to be dependent on people's personalities, but I wonder how much of this is society kind of expecting women to act a certain way. Because as I was reading this, I didn't see, it seemed like almost everyone that was saying that was a woman, was female.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. I'm sure that plays a little bit into it, but personally, it's just been kind of always part of who I am. If somebody wants something of me and they're nice and they're a friend, I often do have a hard time saying no. And then after thinking about this too, I've thought about the times in the past where I've asked a favor of a friend and then, I'm like, oh, have they said yes to me just because yeah, I think that's just a human thing for the most part. I mean, I feel like maybe, our society makes it more okay for, men to say no and just leave it at that.
I think it's beyond, I guess my take on it is beyond okay. I think it's encouraged. But...
Yeah, a lot of things are encouraged for men that aren't for women. That's
exactly. Well, and before because there are a couple of kind of moving away from the comic and getting more into the whole society and political side of things. I did want to ask you one last thing, because a cartoonist I interviewed back a year ago, I was asking her about a really messed up character. If anyone's curious, it was Spunko the Clown in Tara Snover's Mock Girl, which is still the most fucked up thing I've ever seen. But she's look at this now. Oh yeah, you should check it out, definitely. But she told me that every comic needs that one bit of something really random, really bizarre, or really creepy thrown in. And I think as I'm reading through yours definitely has to be the gender dysphoria demon bug, which I think he's only made 2 appearances or more. But it was such a great representation, at least because I'm looking at it going, it doesn't even necessarily have to be dysphoria, because it could be depression, it could be anxiety, it could be agoraphobia, it could be anything. But how did you come up with that visualization, or how does that, how true a representation is that for you?
It was one day I was just in this really bad mood. It wasn't the actual drawing wasn't specifically spawned from, me having a bout of bad gender dysphoria.
You mean a giant insect didn't burst from your chest? And
Yeah, I was just in this really bad mood one day, and I was just, drawing, and that drawing came out.
Right.
Specifically the one where the bug first made its appearance, and it's the first panel of it whispering in Jessica's ear.
Yeah.
That was the first drawing of the gender dysphoria bug demon. And that just was born from me being in a really bad mood. And then after I drew it, I was like, hey, I could use this for the comic to describe gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's my mood changed that, and I got in a good mood, and I started drawing the comic, which brings me to the latest one with the gender dysphoria bug, which, because transitioning for me did not get rid of the dysphoria 100%.
Sure.
It comes back sometimes, and it could be even more painful than ever before.
Right.
But yeah, after I posted the comic, I've gotten tons of support from friends being like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you having a rough time?" And I just want to be like, if I was having a rough time, that comic wouldn't have been able to be made. I was having a rough time the week before I started planning the comic, and then the week of actually making the comic, I'm in this super good mood, especially because I was really happy with the way that one turned out.
Right, and it had to be rewarding to get that kind of feedback too, because it obviously resonated with some readers.
Oh yeah, my web, because like I haven't been doing this comic for more than a year yet. July 3rd will mark the year since I started doing this on a regular basis, and that comic, and the days after I posted it, I got 21,000 visitors to my website, and it just kind of freaks me out that many people. I never thought that many people would ever look at any cartoon I've ever made, because especially growing up, people were like, "You don't want a cartoon. This is not good. Stop cartooning."
Oh God. Nothing like getting encouragement.
Oh yeah, like my mother, discouraged me. My art teachers discouraged me.
Art
teachers. I had a high school art teacher that told me, it's like, oh, you have so much natural talent, but you're wasting it on cartoons.
Oh my God, your cartoons are awesome.
I know, like I kind of, I think with one of the comics I posted, I just like said, take that, high school art school teacher.
Yeah. And just so we do get that audience boost, because there has to be something for you for coming on the show. Remember, guys, it's manicpixienightmaregirls.com. Spell it right, all one word. And we'll mention it again at the end, but I want to make sure to get that out there in case someone's just tuning in. Okay, so moving on to some more general politics, because we've been hitting a lot of the societal stuff, and I mean that's what the comic really addresses. It addresses a lot of double standards and a lot of the things that life is going to throw at you. But I'm curious about, because it doesn't necessarily get overtly political, so I'm kind of curious as to where you are on some of this stuff. I tend to think of trans rights as the next phase in sort of an ongoing civil rights battle, which started maybe 100 years ago with women's suffrage, and of course half a century ago with civil rights. And as I'm thinking about where we are now, we're coming up on a Supreme Court decision that will likely, hopefully strike down all same-sex marriage bans. And if they do fall short of that, it's inevitable that that's going to be a done issue. I mean, to the point where I think that right-wing politicians have essentially given up on it and shifted their focus away from the LGB part of that. And I think the transgender community now is becoming more firmly in their sights, and that's a perverse form of progress, I suppose. But I wonder how you see that going, and where's the next phase in the culture war there. I mean, it's not, they're squabbling over bathroom bills and public, anti-trans public school policy, but
yeah, it's bad. The larger political stuff is completely depressing to me. Like, how bad is it that gay activists had to like fight tooth and nail just to, get this marriage equality thing? Yeah. Really, and then if you look at what more radical activists are saying, that there's so much more that needs to be done than just simply marriage. There's employment discrimination and just countless other
housing, lending, medical. Yeah. Well, and this was my guest a couple weeks ago, Megan Gedris, was saying that she's just hoping that when this thing finally is a done deal, that society just doesn't do this collective hand washing and be like, okay, that's it, gay rights are done, because it's one specific thing. It's a big thing. It's an important thing, but it's one aspect. And the other thing, and I can't remember where I read this, but I read this earlier today, and somebody had put down the comment that we just hope that the LGB stays part of the movement. That suddenly it's not suddenly T by itself. And I look at the Human Rights Campaign, which, depending on your point of view, could either be one of the greatest organizations in the world or somebody who's constantly throwing you under the bus and using you as a bargaining chip.
Well, it's funny, the HRC, there was this study that just came out that talked about how in the organization itself, it's mostly just white dudes, then they have a diversity problem, and which completely explains why, they thrown trans women under the bus over and over again,
right,
or just used us to, make themselves look better, or like done half-assed feeble attempts to bring, trans awareness to the public.
Right. But awareness is one thing, but awareness without understanding really only makes everything worse.
Understanding, that's like something that like, I feel like even a lot of people get wrong. Like, a lot of times folks want to like, okay, I'm going to explain to you what being transgender is. And then once you understand, then stop hating us. And I think that's even,
right.
For me, I feel like we need to look, when it comes to bigotry and prejudice, I honestly feel like people aren't looking inside themselves. Progressives and liberals, and even radicals, they feel like because their official ideology is X, then they automatically don't have any unconscious bias against
Right.
queer people, people of
Right.
color, etc.
Yeah.
And so, because, we're all raised in this, awful society that hates tons of people who aren't white men, right?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
there's all this stuff that gets ingrained in our brains and, that we don't even think about, but, we just might take as truth because, we've seen it playing out in movies over and over again.
Right.
Or like, we've heard things coming out of politicians' mouths, for years. Like there's just like certain ideas
Right.
about certain types of people that get stuck in your head.
Yeah.
And it's almost like people can't help it. People are afraid of transgender women in restrooms, even though that we're the ones who face the violence.
Yeah, you're the ones that are getting attacked.
Yeah,
exactly.
You look and, it's just over and over again in the media, trans women are portrayed as killers, murderers.
Well,
and
you did a comic about it where I think I don't know if it was the ally character, but I'm assuming it was, where she's like, hey, I brought some movies that have transgender characters, and everyone's like, oh God. And I was Silence of the Lambs, Psycho. I think the best of the bunch, and I only say best because at least it took things relatively seriously, was The Crying Game. And yet, God, I gotta hope that we've come a long way from, as they put it, that the best representation still has everybody vomiting over the fact that trans people exist.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and then again, too, like a lot of those characters, like a lot of trans characters in general, trans women characters, they're written by cisgender men,
right,
who are definitely insecure with the idea of even being attracted to a trans woman. So, like, of course, there's going to be this, because, like, again, like I said, people, like cis people don't really see us as our gender.
Right.
And so if, a straight cis dude is attracted to me and then that might make him insecure about his sexuality or even his gender, because trans people are legitimate, then, that means everybody's gender is up, for debate. Like, oh, what can I be?
Right. And yet it comes down to, you are what you believe yourself to be. I mean, it's kind of like, nobody can really question my sense of being male, because that's my sense of it. I possess that. Nobody can take that from me. And yet that's, if anything, that idea is reinforced in my mind by transgender existence, because again, you're claiming that as your own. And yet, you're right. People are threatened by that. And it's a bit absurd. It really is.
Yeah, I would encourage people to look up the article about how sex and gender is both a social construct. Like, honestly, these are concepts that are a little difficult for me to grasp personally.
Right.
But, I encourage folks to, like, Google, sex as a social construct.
Right.
So they can get a better sense of that.
Except, unfortunately, the people that need it the most are the ones that are least likely to do it and wouldn't buy it if they read it anyway.
Yeah.
Some people are just immune.
That's another thing, too. It's like changing people's minds. That I'm not trying to do that because, that never works anyways.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because, I figure your audience is probably, there's threefold. There's going to be some well-meaning people, I suppose, that will get some information from it. And I mean, I would put myself somewhere on that spectrum. Obviously, you're preaching to the choir to some extent. Yeah, you're going to have a huge trans audience, no question about that. I'm curious how much feedback you get that would be classified as hate one way or another, either from strictly transphobia or maybe TERFs or something of that nature. Because I'm kind of curious how people, like, I got to think you get your share, but then I kind of wonder how people even stumble across it and spend enough time reading it to get what it is and then bother to respond to it. But do you get a lot of negative feedback from what you do?
Honestly, not really, not quite yet. I've gotten some negative feedback, people telling me to die, etc., calling me a freak, kill it with fire. I've gotten, Christian person telling me that I'm going to hell. But, like, honestly, like, the feedback has been extremely positive for the most part.
Right.
Which, I did not see this coming a year ago when I started the comic. A year ago, like, I was really down in the dumps. I was super depressed. I couldn't hold down a job. I was eating ramen basically every night because we, can't afford food because I can't hold down a job.
Right.
And just in a really dark place. But I started doing the comic and it's, just like more and more positive feedback. And it's like I said, I never thought anything like this would happen.
Right. And once more on the idea of representation in the media, because again, you mentioned the fact that trans characters typically are written by cishet white men, just because we seem to do everything. Or at least we think we do. So I imagine though that you have an opinion one way or another on Eddie Redmayne playing Lily Elbe in the Danish Girl.
Yeah, that whenever a trans person is played by a cis person in the media, I kind of cringe at that. Because it's not very hard. And like I said, I was struggling keeping down a job. And this is the issue that all trans women struggle with. Even trans women actresses. Yeah. And it wouldn't be that hard to find a trans actress who could play her, but and then and if anyone's familiar with her story, it's extremely tragic. So I know the media is just going to paint her as, or the Hollywood or whoever's making this movie, I'm afraid is going to paint her as like this pathetic creature who everyone just feels sorry and pity for. And it's just whenever cis people are making media with trans characters, they simply, because it's impossible to know everything, right?
Right.
And especially if you're not living that life, it's doubly hard to understand that. So even stuff that's decent in the media, there's this new film with a trans actress called Boy Meets Girl.
Yes.
And I watched that, and a lot of it is very cringeworthy.
Really?
And some of it's good. Oh yeah. I mean, for me personally.
No, I haven't seen it yet, but I think you're the first person I talked to that has. So what was your overall take? And then what was
the first the actress, the main person, the protagonist was great. She's awesome, and her character was lovable and all that kind of stuff, but very highly sexualized. And I got the feeling that by the end of the movie, I kind of felt like the message of the movie was that it's okay for you to want to fuck a trans woman. I felt like that's what the message was.
And yet that's, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that to date, that's probably the most positive representation trans people have gotten from anything remotely mainstream. And that's, my faith in humanity just took a dive that is unfortunately a message that somebody could take away from that.
Well, it's going to plus, because I'm transgender and I spend more time because I understand trans issues a little deeper than the average cis person. Sometimes
you don't say
from an outside cis person's point of view, or even I have lots of trans friends who love the movie, and I could see why. Like I said, I came away from the film feeling the message was, hey, it's okay to be attracted to trans women.
Right.
And it turns out that the person who made the film, actually has a record of dating trans women in the past. And so that's why it's I feel like the movie was a little closer to, better representation, because the filmmaker probably has transgender women in his life.
Right.
But
my understanding was that the actress was also Michelle Headley was also very much involved with the writing and a lot of that. There was a lot of consultation there too, as I understand it. So I would assume there'd be a lot of genuine.
I bet she saved that movie if that's the case. If she didn't get to have any say in it, it might have been worse.
Right. Okay.
But she's great in the film, and personally, I am all about anything. Just if it has the trans actress in the movie, I'm gonna, at least check it out and say check it out.
Right.
A few years ago, there was that Gun Hill Road film. Yeah, I felt like that was a little better, even though the protagonist wasn't the trans woman. It was this man who left prison to come home to find that his child is a trans woman, and he kind of has a hard time dealing with that. And that movie kind of touched me a lot more than Boy Meets Girl.
Okay. Well, it sounds like that's it sounds like that's maybe a more personal story in terms of family acceptance and relationships, as opposed to, as you say, it's okay to want to fuck a trans woman. So that's a great. You know what though? If you wrote that as a review for the movie, this is what I took away from it. That would fall to the top of the list on IMDb.
I'm saying, it's kind of funny how from an outside perspective, that's a positive message, because how often
I know, but it's
up on TV when they find out that we're trans.
Yeah,
so
but it's like,
hey,
how
not puking.
are you? Yeah, but you're really settling here. Come on, it's like if that's what qualifies a positive message, it's like it's like we've come so far and we still have a ways to go. Now, well, also with representation, because my show tomorrow night is actually, I was interviewing the two women behind the not Caitlyn Jenner, the Vanity Fair, the My Vanity Fair cover. I don't know if you've heard about that, but they basically were going from the Caitlyn Jenner story, and essentially they were having people put their own pictures on that. And kind of this is our story, because there's more than that. I wonder if where you are on the Caitlyn Jenner story in terms of in terms of whether or not, first of all, she's really good representation or accurate representation, because I've heard some take on it. You have $100 million. I don't know that your story is representative of anybody, because you're just not going to have the same issues. And then also the thing that I took away from it, which, and granted, as you pointed out, being liberal, being Democrat, being atheist even, does not make you immune to homophobia or transphobia. But when I heard that she came in part of that same interview, said that she was a conservative Christian Republican, suddenly I'm like, are you what? And that got stuck in my head. It's still stuck in my head. That was like the 10 seconds that I took out of that 2-hour long video, and I still can't get it out of my head. So I guess I wonder what your take on her representation, her quality of her representation in general, and then also if you think folks like me who are hung up on the Republican side may be overreacting or not. What's your take on that?
Maybe after a few years, and if see how the world treats her, if she'll still be a Republican or even a conservative.
Okay, you and I are on the same page.
But yeah, she's like super filthy rich.
Right.
She gets whatever it's like you have to put your, like, imagine if you could have anything you want at any time.
Right.
Like what that does to somebody.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely not an accurate representation of the average trans woman.
Right.
As far as the Vanity Fair covers go, I was thinking about doing my own.
You should.
Where I'm picking my nose.
Did you hear that, Jen?
But yeah, back to Caitlyn Jenner. Like, she's just been in the media so much in the past week. And there's this argument going on whether if it's a good thing for the trans community or a bad thing. And, since doing the comic, more and more like trans women, add me as they're a friend on Facebook. So, I have, I see tons of trans women on my Facebook feed. And I could, with confidence say that in the past week, there has been, at least the people on my Facebook feed have gotten more harassment. Yesterday morning I woke up to, see a picture of someone in a hospital bed because they got beaten up the night before.
Right.
And
that's not going to happen to Jenner. Let's face it.
Like visibility maybe in the long term might be better, but like the immediate effects of it, might be increased in visibility might mean people might be able to pick us out much more easier.
Right.
And target us for harassment.
Right. The more they're thinking about it, the more they're looking. Yeah. It's definitely a mixed blessing, of course, as just about everything is in life. But just from the point of view, you mentioned the job discrimination. Someone with $100 million in the bank doesn't have to worry about whether or not they can hold down a job. Regardless of what laws are passed, Caitlyn Jenner is going to use the restroom that she wants, and nobody's going to say anything about it. Law enforcement is not going to look the other way if she's attacked. She's not going to be attacked. Let's face it. And so and she's never going to want for medical care. How someone is going to afford medical care in general or specific to transitioning, never going to be a second thought. Yeah, she's never going to be subsiding on ramen noodles, that's for sure.
Yeah, and nearly every trans woman I'm friends with, struggles in one way or another with employment. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I had this job and people didn't realize I was trans at first, and I was doing great there. And, because I'm an out and open type of person, I can't just say nothing about it.
Right.
And it's like the moment that people knew that I was transgender, my work was not seen as good. And it's like this thing happens, and it's like almost if people aren't doing it on purpose, but it's like this resentment.
Yeah.
That I don't know how to describe it.
Well, I think it is just a general. It's like you say. There's those biases that we have, because I've watched people watching two people goofing off at work, for example, or watching me goofing off at work, for example, and just laughing at it, and he's a funny guy or whatever. And I've seen a black guy do the same thing, and suddenly it's, man, that guy's always goofing off. And it's like, he just did the same thing I just did. What the hell?
Yeah.
And so you do have those, you do have those biases.
Well, you know, like we were talking about family stuff earlier too, you know, like there's been rift in family since my transition, and, you know, like.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about how friends and family reacted.
Yeah, you know, like, well, I mean, my family is kind of small, but you know, the chunk of family who did say they're accepting, you know, like I was really excited. But then, like, soon it kind of dissolved into them nitpicking everything I did and said. And, you know,
isn't family great for that, though?
With, you know, like saying all things, asking me if I've ever titty fucked myself.
Oh,
like, no one cares.
Wait, that wasn't a joke? Somebody actually asked you that? Because that was a line in the comic. Oh my fucking God.
Yeah, so, but, you know, and it's just like, yeah, but I mean, it's not just with family. It's like with everyone. It's just you're judged more harshly than definitely I was when the world was seeing me as a man. I felt like I could get away with I could be like a total asshole and everyone loved me.
Right.
You know, and, you know, now I'm like, obviously I've like grown out, you know, like I said, like as a teenager, I might have been kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm like older and wiser and kinder. And it's just like I get this harsh judgments, and like everything I say or do is like put under a microscope or just like taken as aggressively. Right. I get that a lot, you know, like say if I stand up for trans women, it's like, oh, stop being aggressive. You know, and it's, you know, and that's like the, you know, thing. Trans women are angry, and rightfully so. Like,
absolutely.
If I am a little aggressive, sorry, you know, it's not easy for us out there.
Right. Right.
And the thing is, it's like I consider myself, you know, lucky, you know, because I have tons of friends that are just way worse than, you know, I've ever had it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, you know, you name the problem. I say, oh, cis people, I'm frustrated with cis people. And, like, cis folks get genuinely like upset with that.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And it's where, you know, cis people don't face any oppression whatsoever for being cis. You know, like there's no one being murdered and yet they're cis.
Yeah, and yet some people will say, well, we have problems too. Yeah, but they're not because you're cis. They're not. Yeah, you've got everything that everybody else has, plus this. Plus, you know, it's like, come on, guys, you don't
Yeah, you know, and like, you know, sometimes trans people like ingest or, you know, even seriously, like say if like every trans person in the world truly hated with all their being cis people, that still wouldn't come close to the actual hate that, you know, trans people, especially trans women of color, especially the most face.
Well, and that was another post you had recently saying that despite being such a minute percentage of the population, somehow trans women are responsible for upholding the oppressive gender norms or something like that. It's like, who do you think you're kidding? What?
There's this small dwindling fraction of, you know, folks who call themselves feminists who are just obsessed with and hate trans people, you know, depending on who they are. They obsess either about trans men or obsess about trans women, but they definitely hate us. Yeah. And, you know, like one of the things they say is that our existence is like upholding the evil gender binary, which is funny because, you know, if say being a typically feminine woman is upholding the gender binary, then there are more cis women who are upholding the gender binary than there are the total amount of trans people who even exist.
Right.
Right. Know? And then they just ignore like, you know, like butch trans women and feminine trans men. And not to mention like, you know, all the genders in between.
Not to exclude everything. You know,
so I mean like the TERFs arguments are just, that's what they call trans exclusionary radical feminists.
Right.
You know, they like their ideas are so easily debunked. It's obvious that their views are rooted in hate or their own insecurity, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. So I also assume though that when you started the transition, it's one of those moments too where you sort of learn who your friends really are. Are you still friends with anybody who you were friends with beforehand, or?
A lot of people stayed by my side.
Really?
But you know, some of the closest people actually, you know, dropped me like a rock. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But okay, we're gonna get a little real now.
Okay.
You know, it's like before, like I transitioned, you know, it's just my pent up gender dysphoria kind of made me insecure about women in general and just feeling almost, you know, like a negative feeling towards women, which once I started transitioning, like flipped off like a light switch. But I feel like maybe some of my friends that I surrounded myself with were also, just for one reason or another had issues with women. And once I transitioned, this really good friend of mine who even, like I had my dog stolen at one point, and this person put up $3,000 to help me get a lawyer to get my dog back, which I actually did.
That's good to know.
Just like one day just like flipped out on me and said like how like I've become this big asshole and I'm a piece of shit now and I'm spreading lies to this is what spreading lies to satisfy my new friends. And so like I've gotten a couple freakouts like that from people, but honestly, like I lost the most friends once I've actually started speaking up on these issues. Like it seemed like a lot of people could take me being transgender, but they couldn't take me standing up for trans rights.
Right. So just one final thing before we wrap up, and this is something that has come up a couple times on the program, but I'm curious how you'd feel about the ban on trans soldiers serving the military.
Oh, I don't like the military personally.
And that's, and that was,
it's kind of like, that's the thing. And I think it's like a, same thing with the marriage argument, how like, rather than changing things for the better, we're just accepting trans people into this shitty institution.
Right. Okay.
And I understand that aspect of the argument, but then part of me thinks too, like a lot of the times the military is, like one of the only places someone could like maybe get an education or something.
Right.
Because I've known, I've had friends who had their back up to the wall and then, they've joined the Navy or, the Coast Guard or something, and they were able to get an education through that. It's definitely not my fight to have, trans inclusion in the military. And I wouldn't really suggest other trans people fighting for that right either.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't want to give trans activists a hard time who have made that their fight.
I wonder actually the more people I talk to, I wonder how many trans activists really are, because it seemed to be more of it was actually one of the first, again, I'm not usually one that I'm going to stand up and argue with somebody who clearly knows more about an issue than I do. And, again, cisgendered male, I'm not going to know as much about the issues that are facing trans women, but it was one of the first arguments I got into, and that's why I tend to go back this issue a lot. And the argument that finally kind of made it dawn on me, which was actually Dana Gass in the first show that I did, she basically said, so you can get an education, you can get healthcare, you can get housing, you can address a lot of these issues, but if you don't have any other real options, then it's de facto conscription. If that's the only way that you're going to get those things. And at that point, I'm just like, now I understand. It's not a simple discrimination case, because it does essentially funnel somebody into a bad system because there's no other options. And for so long, I thought these things aren't mutually exclusive. And then I realized, well, no, actually they kind of are, because if you have a system that does address these things, it does take the focus off addressing them elsewhere.
No, absolutely. And I completely agree with that. And that's basically my view. But, like at the same time, it's hard because sometimes I feel like marriage equality is an easier way to talk about this. Mm-hmm. For instance, marriage equality for some queer people might mean like, health insurance or citizenship, which could be life or death.
Right.
But like, why can't we have that stuff without marriage?
Right.
That kind of issue. So it's this hard spot for me personally, because I want lives to be better for trans people right now, and if that means if marriage is going to help somebody, then that's awesome.
Right.
But at the same time, we should not, shy away from like these bigger issues. Like, why can't everyone just have health care, or, why can't it be easier?
That's crazy talk. Whoa, universal health care. Come on. What are you, a communist? No, I hear you. Absolutely. Well, Jessica, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. So the comic is manicpixienightmaregirls.com. You've got a Patreon on that?
Yes. And I just wanted to say that, Manic Pixie Nightmare Girls fans are the best fans in the world, because the comic wouldn't even exist without them. When I first started the comic, I had to do it on someone else's computer. I was like fumbling with my papers, scanning them in and putting them in, someone else's computer who's very, like very patient with me, letting me use their computer for so long. And, but yeah, just the response has been great, because without them, I wouldn't be able to pay rent or eat or anything. And I love them so much. And I never thought people could be so kind.
That is great. That is great to hear. And you've got a GoFundMe, which is for merchandise coming up on the, what was the event?
Trans Pride and Gender Odyssey. I actually have merch tables, but the problem is I'm still too poor to forward any merch in advance. So I was just asking folks if they're able and willing, if they could throw me a few bucks here or there to help pay for, posters, stickers, and etc. that I could sell at Trans Pride.
Well, and you know what, guys? She's a great artist. It's good, absolutely great cartoon. So check out the Patreons and the GoFundMes, and if you're out there, definitely pick up some merchandise as well. So
we're also on Facebook too. Facebook.com/Manic Pixie Nightmare Girls, which is where I talk to most of the fans, like through the Facebook, because I'm not good with technology. Facebook is easy to use.
Well, that's why we're talking on Skype. Like I think I said earlier, it's free and nobody's forced me to change it. Well, Jessica, again, thank you for coming on the program. It's great talking to you.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Thank you.
As always, if you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard here tonight, or suggestions for future shows, guests, or topics, love to hear from you. You can email me at niceguy9418@usa.com, friend me on Facebook at Eddie Cabot, or leave a comment on my blog at eddiecabot.blogspot.com. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. Also, do not forget, because I think that at this point there's only a day or two left, don't forget to check out the Kickstarter over on craveoriginalseries.com. And I thank everyone for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your evening here on Rainbow Radio.